It is now official. Portugal just doubled the citizenship timeline as of 3rd of May 2026 when the president actually signed the citizenship law to change from 5 years to 10 years for non-EU and non-CPLP countries, as well as 5 to 7 years for CPLP countries and EU nationals. And I'm sure you've already gone through enough of the news headlines. If you're interested in this information, please note that this video is also for information purposes only, but this video is just as a follow-up from what exactly happened from the previous video, and I promised that I would do a follow-up video, so please go ahead and listen up until the very last minute so that you can understand exactly what happened and what it means for you. My name is Nduta Wambura. I'm not an immigration officer. I'm not an immigration lawyer. Please always do your own research and get an immigration lawyer depending on your case and scenario, because one case is very different from the other. So you need to know exactly what is at stake for you so that you're not jumping ship and wondering what next. Here is what actually happened. Since 2022, Portugal has seen a very significant surge in immigration, hundreds of thousands of new arrivals, many through the golden visa, the digital nomad visa, the D7 visa, all the D-class visas that you might want to think of. And if you have visited Lisbon, for instance, or any one of these bigger cities, Porto, Faro, you would see the real surge in numbers in these bigger cities. And by 2025, which is last year, IMA, which is the body that actually caters for the immigration cases and issues the residence permits, it had a backlog of about 400,000 pending cases, and the system was creaking. The system is still creaking to date. However, they are kind of trying to make sure that things are back to normal. And if you have been in the process of waiting for your residence card, then you know this firsthand. And I want to be very honest about this means for you. It does not mean that Portugal is actually now closing, because I've seen several people saying, oh, Portugal is now closing, it doesn't want people. The thing is, there are options for you. 100% there are options for you. The only thing that is becoming more difficult is the waiting time that you have to do, because obviously the timelines have changed. Then how they count the residency is also changing, which is what we are going to talk about next. So it is important to understand the timeline, because if especially you have been living here in Portugal already and you have already maybe stayed for like 2 years and you haven't even had your residence card issued, then this is definitely one of the things that you have to think about, because the residency timeline is only going to be calculated from the day that your residence card is issued and not from the day you actually applied for that card, which used to be the case in the past. And so this would mean that once the card is issued, if for instance it's actually issued within this year, it would mean that once it is issued, that is the time that you will start counting your 10-year mark for you to qualify to apply for citizenship in Portugal. And once you qualify, I would dare say give it about 2 to 3 years before everything can be processed, because in the norm, this is the timeline that it takes for, the process to be completed, all the documents to be checked, all the background checks to be done, and so on and so forth. So this is a very important thing that you have to realize. And if you were just about to hit the 5th year mark and now you cannot be able to actually apply for citizenship yet, what I would say, there's an option of applying for permanent residency. And permanent residency would mean that you don't have to keep on even renewing your residence permit every other single 2 years or 3 years. It means that it gives you rights which are similar to a citizen in Portugal. It is also still very much open for you to apply for permanent residency on the 5th year mark. So all is not necessarily lost. There are requirements for permanent residency, obviously, and which are a bit less stringent, I would say, but still little similar to what you would find on the citizenship application, because you would still need to present all the documents so that they can convert your temporary residency to a permanent residency. There are several other changes that occurred in terms of, things to do with new language and civic requirements. You will now need a super verified A2 level Portuguese language test, unless you are obviously from a CPLP country. You will also need a test of basic knowledge of Portuguese culture, history, and political structure. So what I would say is start learning the Portuguese language, because it's not an easy language. Start learning as early as you can, because 5 years, 10 years go like this. I will tell you for a fact, I have experienced it myself. It goes very fast, and you need to start learning as soon as you can. Please, por favor, please. Start learning as soon as you can. Do not rush it through, because time will run so fast. It will be time for you to apply for citizenship, and you'll be wondering why you don't know some of this information. Yet it's just about a thing of exposing yourself to the culture, to the politics of the country, to the history, to the political structure, really, all these kind of things. Another thing that obviously changed was about the children of immigrants. And this has been one of the biggest debates that has happened within the past weeks. And under the old law, if one parent had been legally resident for just 1 year, children born in Portugal could be citizens at birth. And now, under the new law, that parent must have been legally resident for 5 years. This affects families who arrived recently and obviously had children here, expecting those children to be Portuguese citizens. Obviously, if you already had your child before this law was actually signed, then you are in the clear, because you would potentially have already registered your child. However, if not, then you would need to legally be here for 5 years and then apply for your child to become as a Portuguese citizen. What I would also say about this is that all is not lost, because you can still register your child to be a citizen of your own original country already. And this does not mean that you would have to stop, any types of movements, because that's the thing that is usually at stake, especially when you get a child in a foreign country. You can still register this child as, for instance, a Kenyan citizen, and still use that, obviously applying for visas and all these kind of things, but it is possible for you to do that. The golden visa holders specifically, the investment program itself is completely untouched. The 500,000 fund route, as well as the 250,000 cultural donation route, the job creation route, all still are very much active and unchanged. The golden visa is not actually going anywhere. And what's changed is just the citizenship timeline at the end of the journey. This means that you will now have to wait for 10 years if you are from a non-CPLP or EU country, and obviously 7 years if you're from CPLP or EU country. Now, one practical update that happened is that the golden visa renewals moved fully online in February of 2026, which is somewhat helpful, if at all, but you still can apply for permanent residency after 5 years, and that is unchanged. Now, permanent residency, I will say this once more, is that it gives you the right to live, to work, to travel across the EU indefinitely without maintaining your investment. And that is still a very strong outcome, if at all, for the golden visa holders. There is a lot of talk that has been going all around, and people are wondering, so what next? Should we leave? Should we go find ourselves in another different country, begin the process all over again? Believe me, I will tell you for free, because yes, you can go to another country, and yes, you can begin a new life. You can restart the clock and maybe still invest perhaps maybe like 6 years or 5 years in another different country, and potentially go through that route and still, go through the process of citizenship. I will say citizenship by naturalization is not an easy process. I have read so many of the sources and so many of the things that happen within the naturalization process. I am not an immigration lawyer or officer. I have just read and consumed quite a lot of information about this naturalization process and why it is such a big deal. I will tell you, it's not easy in any one of these cases. I mean, obviously, if you have an investment, it becomes a bit easier. But for the typical person who just moved to a different country, they have invested their time, they have been working there, they have been paying taxes there, they have been pretty much doing an everyday person type of situation, then this becomes quite frustrating because you would potentially have to wait a little longer. But I will say, think about it this way. Maybe you have already spent 4 years in Portugal already, and maybe you've been holding a residence card for 3 of those years. It means that you need 7 more years for you to be able to qualify to actually apply for citizenship, right? If you decide that, you know what, I cannot wait for this to happen, maybe for instance move to a country, for instance in Germany, then you would have to wait for 6 years, right? From the very start, 6 years, learn the language, the German language, change pretty much everything, and then at the 6th year mark, potentially apply for citizenship. And this is potentially because things could go, sideways, perhaps, and then you would have to maybe wait, give or take, let's say 7 years, right? This means that you have uprooted your life, and I would dare say, give it a whole total of 8 years before you settle in, you get your residency permit and all these kind of things. That is a total of 8 years. If you would have stayed in Portugal, it would have only been 6 years, right? And it goes very fast. I'll tell you, it goes very, very, very fast. It would be a total of 6 years, and then you would qualify for citizenship on the 10th year mark. And in fact, you would already have qualified for permanent residency on the 5th year mark. What I also want to tell you is that the reason as to why you're moving into any other country, whatever the country, I have learned over time myself that I have been privileged to actually travel to quite a number of countries. And what I will tell you is that you have to be very clear on the reason as to why you want to move to a certain country. You can be moving to Portugal because of the security, maybe because of founding a company, a startup, possibly a digital nomad who wants to pretty much stay around in Portugal because it's better for taxes and all these kind of things. You want to maybe enjoy Portugal, the quality of life. Maybe, you are married here in Portugal. All these kind of things. There are several reasons as to why you potentially would be moving to Portugal, and the reason would not be necessarily just the citizenship. If you are just starting your Portuguese journey, it means that you still have to plan for a longer timeline from day one. My honest take about all this is that Portugal is recalibrating, and other EU countries are also recalibrating. Pretty much everywhere you go across the world, countries are recalibrating, and the political direction, keeps on shifting. And it doesn't mean that since it has shifted now, it will not shift again and again and again. And in my opinion, what I would say is keep yourself as informed as possible. Be very clear on the reason as to why you want to move to any other country. It doesn't even mean Portugal. It could be anywhere else. What is it exactly that you want to gain from going into this country? And what is it that you're also going to provide into this country? I always say this, and let me tell you, it's a symbiotic relationship. It's never a one-way thing. As much as Portugal is seemingly now becoming a bit, quite stringent in terms of the paperwork, I would still say, and I would still advocate for this country because the quality of life is real. The security is real. The opportunities to build your own business, your own startup, and there's a huge international community here. If this does not work for you, you can start thinking of any other place that would potentially work for you. Maybe you want to go invest there. Maybe you want to look for a job in that a different country. Whatever it is, you still have options. You still have options also in Portugal. And so do your research and know what exactly works for you and what doesn't. So I do hope that this video has given you some thought process, and until next time, bye.